During the releases of 2002's Die Another Day and Casino Royale, there were 4 long years there where Quentin Tarantino attempted and tried to have the rights.
The reason they did Casino Royale all comes down to me.
At the time, this was just written off as hot air and tabloid fodder, but it's been confirmed that the director of GoldenEye and Casino Royale, Martin Campbell, he has confirmed that Tarantino was in play and even bid on the film rights. So let's take a look at what Quentin Tarantino's James Bond would have been like.
James Bond. I'm sorry. That last hand nearly killed me.
Campbell has explained that Casino Royale was not going to be the next film. They were developing another original script, but then, after a long battle, the Broccoli's suddenly got the film rights to the first Bond novel, despite Quentin Tarantino bidding a large amount against them. And whilst fighting for the rights, Tarantino went public in 2004. He wanted it to be a period piece set in the 1960s, with Pierce Brosnan still in the lead role. And after being considered as a directorial prospect by Eon Productions, it is now revealed that Tarantino tried to secure the rights to the book himself.
I made it a point that I said I wanted to do Casino Royale. They were already on record as saying that the movie was unfilmable.
Ian Fleming's first novel was not included in the original deal struck by Eon Production founders Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, and that omission led to the 1967 spoof film starring David Niven. So if you were wondering why the original Casino Royale film isn't really in line with the Eon Productions, it's because it wasn't produced by Eon and the Broccoli, so it's kind of an outsider film, it's a spin-off essentially, and it isn't really relevant to the Bond films, it's not included in the Bond saga.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
Essentially what we are hearing here is that Tarantino wants to do the same thing, but with Pierce Brosnan, which would have been pretty hard since he actually was Bond at the time. Martin Campbell, the director, continued saying that the script being developed was an original story in which James Bond isn't the character we knew today, but someone younger and more screwed up. Pierce Brosnan was getting on for 49 or 50 and clearly too old to play the younger Bond, so they decided to go in a different direction. We reached out to the Ian Fleming people and they suggested that they still own the rights to Casino Royale, and that's what I wanted to do after Pulp Fiction, was do my own version of Casino Royale, and it would have taken place in the 60s. We would have cast one actor and been done. But then, it turned out that the Broccoli's 3 years earlier figured out somebody else was going to try and do that. So, what they did was make a blanket deal with the Fleming estate and said that we have the movie rights to everything he's ever written. We're going to give you a bunch of money, and this is for every single thing that he's ever written. If anybody wants to make a movie out of it, they've got to come to us. And at the end of the day, Tarantino not directing Casino Royale came down to the rights issue. And it says here that however remote the possibility was, the loophole that Tarantino eyed was that the fact that Danjaq did not originally secure the screen rights back in the early 1960s when they inked their deal with Ian Fleming because the author had already sold the book. Danjaq is owned by the Broccoli family, and it seems that Tarantino was trying to get the rights. And as for Tarantino, he was still clearly upset at losing out on the chance to put his stamp on the Bond franchise. He later stated, "It would have been my James Bond film and not a Cubby Broccoli Bond film, and I would have done it with Pierce Brosnan." And he continued to claim that if it were not for him making the suggestion, Casino Royale would not have turned out as a 21st adventure.
You know, that's not half bad. I'm going to have to think up a name for that.
And during all of Tarantino's public press trying to fight for the rights of Casino Royale, in 2004, that Uma Thurman would play Vesper if he was to direct his own version of Casino Royale. And I mean, that isn't completely unexpected because Uma Thurman has worked with Tarantino many, many times and she kind of comes along as part of the package with Tarantino. You could almost say Samuel L. Jackson too, but thinking about Uma Thurman as Vesper in Casino Royale, directed by Quentin Tarantino, does really make you think, and it kind of, it was so interesting to see Pierce Brosnan, Uma Thurman, directed by Tarantino in a 1960s period piece. I think that is something that it would just be a dream for a lot of Bond fans. And now I understand a lot of people don't really like the idea of Tarantino directing a Bond film, or in fact Casino Royale, due to the fact that he typically directs films which are pretty R-rated, they're quite dark. Obviously the comedy in the script is one of the greatest things which Tarantino implements into his films, but a lot of people don't really think that he could pull off a Bond film. And now although Tarantino hasn't really directed a Bond or a spy film in the past, I think he would have the directorial chops to really pull it off. I think we could expect something more of a detective film, I don't really think it would have turned out anything like Martin Campbell's version of Casino Royale, which we got. I think, obviously, it would have been set in the 60s, like I said, but it would have been a completely different film, and I think that would have been great. I actually quite like the idea of Bond films outside of the Eon timeline. I understand in the past, the 1967 Casino Royale didn't really land, but when we have had Bond, I guess you could say spin-offs, and although it's not directly out of the timeline, On Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby is one of my favourite Bond films, and it's completely ballsy and it changes up the formula of the previous film, so I think it really does interest me, this idea that Tarantino is very, very close to getting the rights and directing his own Casino Royale. It was also mentioned that Pierce Brosnan did confirm that himself and Tarantino met. He mentioned that Tarantino was a huge Bond fan and he wanted to remake Casino Royale. Pierce Brosnan said, "I don't know if it's ever going to happen. What Tarantino will bring to the film is life and a great sense of excitement and danger, and the perspective of a filmmaker who has really made people sit up and watch his films. He's got a cutting edge, which we got with the latest Bond film."
I must be dreaming.
And soon after this, in August of 2004, Tarantino actually took his campaign to television. Tarantino later appeared on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, where he talked extensively about his desire to direct a James Bond film. He appeared very excited about the idea of directing a Bond film, and Casino Royale was the one he intended on doing. And at the end of the year, after Pierce Brosnan officially confirmed he will no longer be James Bond, he also said that the people over at Eon Productions turned down Quentin Tarantino's idea. And now what is really interesting to me, one of the ideas why this idea of this Tarantino Bond film has been reinvigorated in my mind is due to the fact that this week we had news that Quentin Tarantino would be stepping down from the movie critic film. And now, I am kind of grasping at straws, but what is the likelihood that Quentin Tarantino could direct, not necessarily Casino Royale, but what is the likelihood that he could direct a Bond film as his final 10th movie? And nobody knows at this point. There were many rumours during 2016-17 that Tarantino was pretty much signed on to actually direct his own Star Trek film where he'd be putting a spin on it himself. So it's not like this is the first time any other big franchise has been connected with Tarantino, but by no means do I think he's connected to the Bond film and that's why he stepped down from that film, but it'll be very interesting and I'd love to see Tarantino direct his own Bond film, and what a way to go out on his 10th film that would be. So guys, what would you think about a Quentin Tarantino Bond film, and in particular Casino Royale? Would you have loved to have seen him make it? And what do you think about now? Would you like to see Quentin Tarantino make a 10th and final film? So guys, thank you very much for watching. Tell me what you think about this down below. Do you like Tarantino? Do you not? And do you think he could work creating a Bond film? As always guys, please like this video, subscribe for more just like this, and I'll see you in the next one.